and they say this, is we want women to advance in academic medicine. So if you can come up with a project that your institution needs, you get nominated for ELAM, they're going to support you in that project. So Julie Panapento got named to do this clinical effectiveness research at the CRI. That's why they chose her. And so they're, you know, automatically we have this, you know, executive coaching for her to succeed in that position. And very, you know, I think that's almost more what they want to see is more concrete advancement that's in line with what you want to do. So you can really tailor it pretty nicely. Karen, do you have any?
Yeah, there's a few other things. They spend a lot of time, as Mary mentioned, it's partway to an MBA. So we did a lot of financial analysis. And for anybody who's in any position where they have to manage a budget, it was really helpful. It's not just adding up the numbers and figuring out if you lose this grant or this contract, what's the long-term implications, is something that nobody here has ever talked to me about. I interviewed Deb Campbell, who was CFO at the time, way back then. It was one of the most fascinating insights into what the fiscal functioning of this institution was, without giving me any real details. So that was extremely helpful. And then I agree with everybody else. A lot of it has to do with how you interact with people, developing some strategies to overcome barriers, recognizing that one strategy isn't enough. And so it's been very helpful in a lot of different ways. It's also made me more open to additional coaching, and because it doesn't make any difference who you are, you need help becoming a better leader.
So expand on that question, we know where some of you are now, but when you were in the program, can you tell us what your leadership role was?
Yeah, I was Vice Chair of Education for the Department of Pediatrics and Associate Dean for Curriculum at the time.
I was pretty much where I am now, so maybe it didn't help that much. No, so I was head of pediatric dermatology, so and had a project kind of starting a new translational research unit, which was kind of what I was focusing on, which is really was a new and different avenue for me.
You've also gotten more involved in CSG.
Yes, yeah, and actually, and part of, you know, one of the things that they did, and this is another concrete example, but they taught you how to interview and how to make CVs and how to make an executive summary, which is something that's used at senior level positions. So I recently got named Vice President of Children's Hospital, Clinical Vice President of Children's Hospital. What did I do? I went back to my ELAM, you know, PDF of how to make an executive summary, and then I emailed my network, and they all sent me theirs, and, you know, oh, that's a good idea, and that's how, you know, I came up with a 2-page summary that I'm pretty sure the other candidates who didn't have. So, again, concrete stuff.
I had just started a new job here as section chief in pediatric endocrinology when Dr. Kleitman recommended me.
And I had just started as chief of surgery at the Milwaukee VA.
Did any of you do the UW MCW leadership program before this, and did it, or after it, or did it build on that, or was that useful, or was it repetitive?
I did it. Have any of the rest of you
done
done
the
it?
MCW one, but I didn't, you know, I have not been involved with the combined UW MCW one, but I did do the MCW one when they had it.
I think it always has been combined with UWM, with Mark Monet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said University of Wisconsin-Madison.
No, it's the
Yeah.
UWM,
Okay.
and it was, it went on for quite some time. And Dr. Walker, is it coming back? Do we know?
We're in the process of working on that.
Yeah, it was excellent. I can't remember which I did first, but they were complementary. And the nice thing about the UWM MCW one was you were working with people here on campus. So
Yeah, I just wondered if you already did the UWM one, if it's built on that, or.
I think ELAM was much more intensive.
And I did the AAMC one for mid-level people, and I thought that was also helpful. I mean, you always learn something from them, but I do think ELAM is a lot more intensive.
What were your projects?
Or in your group, like what are the ones that stuck out or something like that? What are the ones that you thought were really neat or something, and what did you do? And
So my, Dr. Adams had asked me to do, like using a PhD educator in the Department of Surgery. And so I went to ELAM, I spent the whole year, I got through this whole thing, but he thought it would be done like when I started ELAM, so he was like, well, we went on from there, you know, like, so it was like completely, it was the most bizarre project. And my advice to people with projects is to do something you're already doing, but expand it, because you don't have enough time in the day to go off on a totally different tangent and try to make that your focus, and you need to have enough. I mean, you guys can correct me if you think I'm way out to lunch, but you need to have enough background work done in something where you're just pushing it forward and getting it really buffed up by ELAM and the help and the counseling and the feedback that you're going to get from it. So to go off and to do something that my chairman thought was important, but then he changed his mind about, it drove me crazy. I'm sorry.
Which you handled well, because you had been to
Yeah, because I handled it well, because I've been to
You
ELAM.
called your learning community and screamed to them.
I did. I was like, are you kidding me?
My institutional action project is not finished. And I wanted to develop a strategic plan for our section that was broader than just the clinical operations of the section. And so that's still a work in progress because we've had a lot of changes in personnel. Among the people in the small groups that you get to know very well are called the learning community. There are 6 of us in that, and I'm trying to think of the action projects. One of them was director of a large oncology surgery program in Manitoba, Canada, and her institutional action project was to create an academic group of oncologic surgeons in their province. And so she's gotten interinstitutional support to do that. She's developed sort of a training program and networking system to try to develop this in her community. Someone else wanted to be an executive associate dean for academic development or something, and she really worked hard on it at the institution she was at, and it wasn't going the way she wanted, and she got a job somewhere else. So it served her. She's now accomplishing that, but at a different institution. So it runs the gamut.
So one of the things I was interested in was team dynamics, so specifically interdisciplinary team dynamics, because I had some frustrations with a project that I had here at Children's. I run the Vascular Anomalies Clinic, and we have lots of different physicians caring for our patients and trying to get engagement in the group and communication with just busy people. So that was something that I wanted to look at, and I actually used it some here, but I used it most in a group that we have, an interinstitutional research group called the Hemangioma Investigator Group that was kind of started, but we took it beyond where we were at, and we developed a mission and a vision, and we actually had the Myers-Briggs come in with our group, which is about 11 institutions, it's about 30 people, and really was pretty successful. So we were able to do some fundraising. So there was a fundraising lecture, so we got funded, and now we have NIH grant funding. So was more kind of, again, learning the skills, but getting a project, and I can't reiterate enough what Mary said is, if you do this, it's something it has to be something that already is on your plate, because you're going to give up 6 weeks of your life cloistered away learning these skills, and to have an additional project is probably not realistic. And so it's something that you want to look back and where you're struggling, what the institution needs would be, and that's probably the time that you should do the project as well, is when you're faced with something that has a big institutional footprint you already have on your plate and you would need help with. I think you'd maximize the experience with that.
Right.
I was before the project, so.
Yeah.
I didn't have one. Although I
Someone
was.
that suggested the project.
We did suggest the project. I was actually in the curriculum office at the time, and it's actually way back then, almost 15 years ago, that we started the curriculum redesign. So we all know how fast that has been moving. But we will get there. I'm bound and determined.
Can you speak a little bit to, we have MDs, we have PhDs, we do people that are very clinical, people that do 100% research. Can you speak to what might be perceived to be required for the position, for the ELAM, or what the mix was, something having to do with that?
Every class is a little bit different, but it is predominantly academic faculty members from medical schools, although it's about 2/3 that and about 1/3 dental. It sounds like they're adding more with the public health and engineering schools, and then we just heard somebody else was thinking about, they were inviting somebody else. But it's all women who are in leadership positions in kind of similar academic settings. Our group was very mixed, clinical and basic science, and that was a really nice thing to see. It wasn't just, because you couldn't all get on the same, let's complain about reimbursement, because that wasn't the issue for everybody. So it was really a nice mix of perspectives and a nice mix of people. As far as what you need to be in a leadership position that the school wants to support. So that's why you really need to talk with your chairs. You need to have his or her support to keep moving as a leader in the institution.
Yeah, I think our institution has not probably had a fair representation from the PhDs, which is part of why we're sitting here, to get the word out, because it's really been more, for whatever reason, just more MDs that have gone here. So we'd like to expand that, and Karen had given a presentation to the chairs of all of the departments, not just clinical, so that everybody knows about it, because I don't think it's been that known. But I don't think it matters at all what your background is. Probably the more diverse class, the better they function.
I have an interesting ELAM story. so I had, they have this whole thing about like going away and going off to go to ELAM, and the question arose, like, would you want to be with a roommate? So I said, what the heck, why not? And apparently that's not very common. So, all right, so there's one other person that also said that they would be with a roommate. Well, she and I went to the same high school together. We went to Divine Savior Holy Angels. We graduated 2 years apart. I stayed in Wisconsin. I went to New York and then came back to Wisconsin to go to school. She went to Wisconsin to go to school and then moved to UCLA. She's a dentist. And they still have family in Oshkosh. So I see her like all the time, because we spent the whole ELAM time together as roommates, and then we were in separate learning committees. But like when I go to Los Angeles, like we go sailing together, and when she won the Outstanding Alum of the Year at Marquette University School of Dentistry, so she came in town and we went out and did brunch together. It was really a lot of fun. So like it is really outstanding and fun how you meet these women who are extraordinary, and they're not necessarily in your subspecialty or your area. So that's my little ELAM story.
So from the basic science, there's not that many leadership positions that you can get established with your director of a core. And generally, you just assistant associate professor. So it's very hard to identify someone that would, or identify yourself as someone that would qualify, because you don't have section chief positions and all that. So I think that's probably the reason why you don't have that many PhD. When do you consider a PhD? When they get a core directorship? I mean, when is that? When do you become eligible to have this kind of programs? Because it's just.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. When does a PhD person become eligible? But we do have, so we had chairs. There were chairs who were there with us. But we also had center directors. We had some people who were leading major research programs who may not have the title of center director. Again, it is a leadership position in an area that your school wants to invest in. So I would think about what other kinds of things would make the school want to invest in you as a leader?
We had a lot, I was kind of in the CTSI years, so we had a lot of people, probably 15 people that were involved in leading sections or leading the CTSI projects, most of which were PhDs. So, you know, it almost maybe is a little bit of a timing issue and looking for the opportunities. But.
Did you guys have anyone in your group that was an assistant professor? Because I don't think we had anyone below an associate professor.
No, it's a requirement, associate or
Okay,
full professor.
Yeah.
Was there something unexpected, something you didn't expect, something that surprised you about going? And I would expect that you would improve your leadership skills and that networking would be a big deal. Was there something that surprised anyone about being at ELAM, something you weren't expecting to get? Or were you, was everything kind of, anybody have anything surprising?
I was surprised at how well I knew my learning group communities. It was interesting to be like, there was, so we first started out and there were like 4 or 5 of us that were continuing to do the monthly conference, and then it kind of whittled down. And then there are people who like dive in and like they'll go, and they'll dive into the group and then they'll like skip out again. You're like, what the heck, what was that? You know? But it was interesting to me that one woman ended up getting a divorce. And, you know, like we all are like, you know, you could hear it on the phone, like everybody looked at each other and we're like, oh yeah, that was kind of predictable, because, I mean, it was predictable from years and years and years earlier when we had been in ELAM and listening to her interactions with her spouse. So I was surprised at how tuned in we were to each other.
I think one of the exercises they do, I'll give away ELAM secrets, but you go in this group, and I really felt maybe like I didn't fit in. I was like, what the heck am I doing with these high-powered, you know, very intense women? I'm not intense, but so what you had to do is you had to talk about yourself in this group, and it was so amazing. You know, almost everybody cried, of course, but the stories behind these women totally changed the way I looked at them. So I think what was surprising to me is, you know, you can't judge a book by its cover. I mean, because you had that opportunity to really hear, you know, where you grew up, what your parents were like. You know, everybody kind of just went through this whole story. So, and it's something that, you know, we've tried to bring back a little bit to my group. They're gone now, so I can say this, but you know, it is, you know, tell me a little bit about what's going on beyond your life, because it explains behavior that you think might not be related. So I think that was really surprising to me, because it seems so corny, and I couldn't believe, you know, it was 6 o'clock at night and you had to go meet with these people, and I just wanted to go for a run and be by myself, and you know, so I thought that was, and to be. To have time to reflect. I'm not somebody that valued that before, and so being away and not being productive and not getting all the stuff done that I had to do, but yet spending time to think about you and what you want to do. I mean, I think as women we are really busy physicians, we're really busy taking care of everybody, and to have that time to think about yourself and what you want for your career, you know, which may or may not be, you know, a leadership position, but that was probably, you know, one of the unexpected things like that.
2 things I want to mention that were a little bit surprising but fun, and I don't know if these answers are disappointing to whoever asked the question. They aren't great big things, they're personal things, but one thing was, and Beth and I have talked about this, the lecture about being a fraud. There was a whole session that started off with, you know, all of you are sitting there thinking, what am I doing here in the midst of these incredibly powerful, productive people? I'm a fraud, I don't belong here, I haven't really accomplished what others have. And the whole lecture was basically, we do not have 52 frauds in this room. You know, you were selected because, you know, lots of people thought you could really benefit from this. And And I've brought that back in new things I've tried to do, and allows me to look in the mirror and say, I can do this, I do have the skills to do this. I don't necessarily think I can do this by myself, but I know how to network, I know who to call, I know that I can stop and reflect about it for a few minutes and that sort of thing. So that was one surprise. The other one was how to really stop and reflect, and you don't need a whole lot of time to do it, but taking 30, 60, 120 seconds throughout the day to just stop and close your door and think about something. Just stop for a minute. And one thing that they encourage that you think about is before you go home at the end of the day, stop and think about one good thing that happened that day. And try to make that your parting thought when you leave work. You know, like I ran into somebody I didn't see for a long time, or I accomplished something huge today and I want to, you know, gloat about it behind my closed door for a minute, you know, and giving you permission to let yourself grow through those things.
Go ahead.
When we were doing, and I've used this with some of my male colleagues, I know I probably like broke the sisterhood or something like that, but, you know,
You're allowed to talk to men.
I'm allowed to talk to men, but, you know, where we would sit down, and we would say, like, okay, so what are the advantages and disadvantages of changing your job? Like, if that's what you're talking about, let's do it. And we used to sit, and I've done this with a couple different guys, we would sit in my family room, and I think Al, you've been in my family room, and there's this big open picture window that looks out over the lake, but when it's dark out, it's completely black. And so spouse and friend, and my spouse and I would sit there, and we would write the pros and the cons, and we'd put on sticky notes and stick them onto the window. We had this big sticky note festival about like, you know, and then you'd have to go through and say, well, what's the good things and what's the bad things, and really weight them, and your spouse was allowed to run up there and say, no, put his sticky note on top of your sticky note, and you're like, okay.